I think we're going to start now. So good afternoon and welcome everyone. We're so happy you're able to join us for today's LDor program. For those who do not know me, my name is Eileen Gorlin. I'm part of the LDor committee. Usually Ruth Shapiro leads off our Zoom programs. And just to let you know, she's fine. She's just enjoying some time with her family today. LDor will be on summer break for the month of August, and we look forward to seeing many of you in September for our pre-high holiday program, and details will be sent on email. Today's program features an inspiring lecture on the 3 weeks in Tisha B'Av by Rabbi Daniel Goldberg, who has spoken to our group a number of times over the past years. The title of today's lecture is Remembering the Mikdash and Remembering the Destruction. And just a little background on Rabbi Goldberg. Rabbi Goldberg joined Congregation Avodah Torah's rabbinic team in 2017 as assistant rabbi, and now serves as our associate rabbi. A graduate of Yeshiva College, magna cum laude, Rabbi Goldberg has received his rabbinic ordination from REITs, and he holds a master's in Bible from YU's Bernard Revel Graduate School of Jewish Studies and completed his coursework towards a PhD in Bible, focusing on medieval biblical interpretation. He has participated in graduate fellowships from the Wexner Foundation, APAC, UJA Federation, and the Zahava and Moshe Strauss Center for Torah and Western Thought. He is also the recipient of the REITs Emerging Leadership Award. At the conclusion of Rabbi Goldberg's lecture, please remain on the Zoom for the movie Children Saved from the Nazis, the Story of Sir Nicholas Winton. The movie is 1 hour long. I have personally seen this movie twice and have found it very moving. Also, to let you know, in case you don't have time to stay on, the link to the movie is on the Avodah Torah LDor page on our website and can be accessed at any time. With Tisha B'Av shortly approaching, I wish everyone a meaningful fast. And now on to our program. So Rabbi Goldberg, I'm going to mute everyone and it's up to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Eileen.
You're welcome.
I'll take from here. I thank you for that generous introduction, that kind introduction. I am going to, I think, right, spotlight, does that work? Okay, hopefully that's helpful. I thank you again for that introduction. I thank the whole committee for the invitation. I thank Ruth Shapiro in particular for all of her hard work every year. I anticipate my invitation to speak to LDor. I seem to always get the 3 weeks slot, which I try not to read into as a slight that, you know, this is generally a down time of year. So that's where we want to slot in Rabbi Goldberg. But it has given me the opportunity to explore a number of topics. This is actually my 5th year presenting during this time period to LDor. And it's given me the opportunity to explore a variety of topics which have spanned medieval Jewish history, modern Jewish history, variety of topics. Tonight, or rather today, it's 1 o'clock. I'm used to teaching at night. This afternoon, I have the opportunity to discuss what I think is a really fundamental and very, very important topic. It's in a sense kind of getting back to basics. I don't think what I'm saying will be basic, but I think it's very fundamental, very much at the core of the 3 weeks. You know, throughout the year, we have an obligation to reflect on, to commemorate, and to some extent mourn the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, and to remember the Beis HaMikdash. It is intensified during these 3 weeks between the 17th of Tammuz and the 9th of Av. It is the kind of the essential theme of our religious calendar and psyche. And for many of us, I'll speak for myself. It's a challenge. Of all of the themes of the year, themes of redemption, themes of tshuva and repentance, of all the themes of the year, I find that this time of year, these 3 weeks in particular, and Tisha B'Av is the greatest expression. It's very hard to tap in to the emotions of this time of year. It's challenging not to feel like the things that we are doing at this time of year are somewhat performative and a little bit inauthentic or insincere. And what I think that the greatest expression, right? This is true of these three weeks, but also throughout the year. As I said, we do things throughout the year to commemorate the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. I think never is it more kind of obvious the disconnect between something that we're doing and the way that we might be feeling than actually at a chuppah. Right? What ends up happening? We have the breaking of the glass under the chuppah, and inevitably it looks something like this. We sing Imashkachech, which is a kind of a serious moment, and then Imashkachech concludes, the chassan breaks the glass, which is meant to symbolize the destruction of the Mikdash. And what happens right away? What do people call out? What's the immediate response? Mazel tov, right? It's like the beginning of a race when you shoot the pistol and then you're off to the races, right? So that incongruity is kind of there. And I think that what I want to try to demonstrate in the little bit of time that we have together is that the rabbis were keenly aware of this challenge, and that they constructed an approach towards remembering the Mikdash that accounts, that has a great wisdom and subtlety, and accounts for that challenge exactly. I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to jump into our first source to try and lay some of the groundwork for where we're going to go. And again, what will be a pretty brief, quick, and hopefully meaningful presentation. The Gemara in Baba Kama is a striking Gemara. The Gemara says as follows in source number 1. I am going to now share. I'm a little out of practice with my Zoom shiurim, so I'm going to share my screen with all of you. Everyone can see what's in front of me. Give me a thumbs up if you can see the source sheet in front of you. Okay, good, excellent. So for those of you who are on Zoom rather than calling in, you can see the source number 1 in front of you, which is a Gemara from Baba Kama, which says as follows. Eliezer Zeira hava saim misane ukme v'kabishuka denahar v'kayi b'shuka denaharda. There's an individual by the name of Eliezer Zeira. He put on black shoes and he went into the marketplace of Nahardea, a city in Bavel. Ashkechu de Beirish Galusa. So officials from the house of the Exilarch, one of these dignitaries, officials, leaders of the Jewish community in Bavel, they found him. V'amarle, and they said to him, Ma'ishna hani misani. They said, why are you dressed so differently? Right? Why are you separating yourself from everyone else in your mode of dress? To which he responds, Amar lahu dika ma'avilna Yerushalayim. He says, I am mourning Jerusalem. That's why I put on these black shoes. So Amrulay, they said to him, At chashivas lot li'is abulay Yerushalayim. Right? Are you distinguished enough? Are you so great that you can mourn Jerusalem in this way? Savur yuharahava. And they reckoned him to be displaying yuhara, which is a kind of religious guile, or he was being presumptuous. He was doing something that was incongruous with his standing in the world, to do this kind of grandiose gesture of mourning Jerusalem in this way, to go out into the marketplace wearing black shoes, reflecting a sense of deep mourning for the Mikdash. And so what did they do to him? Is ave v'chashvua, right? They put him into some sort of prison. I don't know what prison the Exilarch had, but they imprisoned this person. And so what happened next? Amar lahu, he responds, this Eliezer Zeira says, Gavra Rabba Ana. He says, I'm actually a great person, which is to say, what I'm doing is not incongruous with my standing in the world. This isn't just pretentious or inappropriate for who I really am. This is a sincere thing. I'm really a person who mourns the Mikdash enough that I can wear these black shoes and have this kind of public display of mourning. So Amrulay minaya danan. So they say to him, how do we know? How can we be so sure that you're really so great that you can mourn in this way? So Amrulay, he says to them, he says, He says, Amar Lahu, he says to them, he says, you can quiz me. He says, you can ask me a question or I can ask you a question, right? So basically, give me a faher, test me, see if I'm really the type of person who's great enough to be mourning Yerushalayim in this way. The Gemara continues with a back and forth between the two of them, a halachic discourse between the two parties here. And then ultimately, Shapir Ka'amar, it is determined that his response to their question to him was good, was correct, Vishavku, and they leave him alone. It's a remarkable Gemara. Can we imagine an alternative, a person's wearing a gartel, a person's wearing some other religious object, and the rabbis say, are you great enough to be expressing your religiosity in this way? It's astounding to put this person in prison. There's a lot of discussion among the commentators. Why was this such an egregious offense that it actually merited being thrown into prison? That's a little bit beyond our presentation today. But what we do see very clearly from this Gemara, which is why I think it helps to frame the whole discussion here, is that the rabbis were disinterested in insincere, kind of grandiose gestures of mourning for Yerushalayim. There was something that they rejected and that they were even offended by. The rabbis don't want us to be doing these kinds of over-the-top gestures to mourn Yerushalayim. What's noteworthy also is that it's not a categoric rejection of mourning Yerushalayim, even in this way. It's that if the person wasn't great enough to really carry it, that's what was wrong, right? So it's really about the sincerity of this particular act. So we're going to use that to frame what I'm going to focus more on, which is the second Gemara. The second Gemara here, I think, picks up on a very similar theme of rejecting a kind of over-the-top mourning of Yerushalayim. It's a very beautiful Gemara. The Gemara says as follows, source number 2. Gemara says, Tanu Rabban, Kishecharav Habayis Bashniya, when the second Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, Rabu Prushim B'Yisrael, Shelo Le'echol Basar, Ushelo Lishtos Yain. After the destruction of the second Mikdash, there were ascetics, holy people who wanted to deny themselves certain pleasures in this world, who decided that they were not going to eat meat and were not going to drink wine. That's how they were going to mourn the Mikdash. So Natfal Lahen Rabbi Hoshua went and he joined them. Amar Lahen, he said to them, Banai, my children. So you see, the even though they're going to be interlocutors here and have something of a disagreement, there's respect and love, and Rabbi Yoshua is approaching them with care and respect. So he says, Banai, why is it that you've decided that you're not going to eat meat ever again and you've sworn off wine? So Amru Lo, they said to him, Nochal basar shemimenu makrivin al gabe mizbeach. Is it possible that we can eat meat that was once given as a sacrifice on the altar in the Mikdash, and now it has become impossible? Since the Mikdash is no longer, how can we possibly eat such meat? Nishta yayin, can we drink wine? Can we possibly drink wine that was used for the wine libations as part of the service in the Mikdash? That's no longer possible because we no longer have the altar, we no longer have the Mikdash. How could we possibly drink such wine? So Amar Lahem, so they make a compelling argument. They make a moving argument. It doesn't feel right, they say. So Amar Lahem, he says to them, Imkain, Lechem lo nochal. He says, if that's the case, so you shouldn't eat bread either. Shekvar batlu minachos, because there were fine flour offerings that were given in the Mikdash as well, and those are no longer. So if you take your logic to its end, you can't eat bread anymore. So they said, okay. They say then efshar b'peiros. So we'll survive on fruits. So Rabbi Yoshua says, Peros lo nochal shekvar batlu bikurim. You can't eat fruits because they used fruits also in the Beis HaMikdash. They used it for bikurim. That was part of the worship, that people would bring their first fruits. So they say, okay, fine. So efshar b'peiros acherim, we'll use the type of fruits you couldn't use for bikurim, because bikurim were for the Shivat Haminim, the 7 species of Israel. We'll eat everything else, right? Instead, we won't eat pomegranates. We won't eat whatever the case may be. We'll eat other things. We'll eat oranges. So Rabbi Yeshua then finally has them at checkmate. He says, Mayim lo nishteh, shekvar batel nisach hamayim. He says, well, you also can't drink water because they used water during the nisach hamayim, the drawing of the water and the water libations on Sukkot. So you can't drink water either. So shatku. After that, they were silenced. After that, they didn't have any more responses. They saw the wisdom of what Rabbi Yehoshua was saying. So Amar Lahen. So then Rabbi Yehoshua, having kind of seized the argument, he says to them, Banai, Ba'u va'omar lachem shelo lehisabel kol ikar hi efshar. He says, look, right? He says, I can't possibly tell you that you shouldn't mourn the Beis HaMikdash altogether. Shikvar nigzera gezera, because what happened, right? The destruction took place. I can't possibly tell you that your life should go on as normal, unaffected, and just continue with your everyday life. But it's not possible, it's not tenable to have these over the top, right? To overly mourn, to be totally kind of undermined and stilted by the loss of the Beis HaMikdash. She'ein gozrin gezera ala tzibor, ela imkin rov tzibor yecholem lamod ba. Because we can't make a decree on the people, on the Jewish people, that the majority of people won't be able to withstand. You can't foist upon people something that is untenable. So you can't do too much, and you can't do nothing at all. So already there we see that beautiful balance. Rabbi Yeshua is reflecting this beautiful sense of balance in the way we're meant to mourn the Mikdash. And so what does he say? Ella kach amru chacham. Says this is the correct approach for how we're going to mourn the Beis HaMikdash. Sad adam es beso v'sid. When a person plasters their home, you're finishing up your home, u'mishayir bo davar muad. You should leave over a small portion of the home unfinished. B'kama, how much should you leave unfinished? Amma Rabbi Yosef, amma al amma. Should leave 1 amma by 1 amma, so let's say about 20 inches by 20 inches, give or take. Amma Rav Chisda kineged haPesach, that it should be across from or next to the entrance of the home. You build a home, leave 1 square unfinished, so that it's a zecher, it's a remembrance, or zecher l'churban, a remembrance of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. It's interesting. I'm not sure if anyone, I can't get a raise of hands because most people's Zooms are off, but their pictures are off. But I think this is not something that we see a whole lot of. I'm curious if anyone on the Zoom has this in their particular home. This is the halacha. This is the halacha that is on the books, that we're meant to do that when we build our homes. So there are all sorts of explanations for why this minhag is not as prevalent as it ought to be. Perhaps because our homes no longer use the type of plaster that was once used. Perhaps, certainly, it is the case that if you don't build your home, you just buy the home. You don't have to remove the unfinished one piece of the home. There's a lot of interesting halachic discussion about this particular practice. It's curious why it's, and I suppose unfortunate, why it's not as practiced as one might have imagined. In any event, that's one way in which we mark the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Next, the Gemara continues, Osa Adam kol tzorchei seuda u'mishayir davar muad. Next, when a person makes a feast, you can make an elaborate, beautiful, robust meal, but leave off one thing. The meal shouldn't be entirely complete. Maihi, the Gemara asks, what is it? Amar Papa, kasa deharsana, a certain type of fish that was obviously prevalent back then. So some kind of delicacy, something should be missing from the table. Additionally, Osa Isha Kol Tachshiteha, a woman can put on all of her jewelry, can be bedecked for an occasion, but Umishayeres Davar Muad, but shouldn't be all the way bedecked. There should be one thing, something from the toolbox, from the jewelry box, as is the case, that should be left, unworn. Ma'hi, the Gemara says, what is that? Amarav, bas tzeda, some sort of jewelry, again, from antiquity that is no longer, in fashion or used today. But the idea expresses itself here is, I think, very, very clear, right? So we have these different forms of mourning. Shine Emar, as the pasuk says, appeals to the pasuk in Tehillim. In Eshkachech Yerushalayim, Tishkach Yemini. Right? If I forget Yerushalayim, my right hand shall be forgotten. Tibak Lishoni Lechiki. Right? Let my lip cling to my upper palate. In Lo Eskereche, if I forget you. So, and the Gemara concludes, I'll just finish this last line. Mai al rosh simchasi, right? The end of that pasuk is in Lo Eskerechi al rosh simchasi, right? If I don't remember you, if I don't set Jerusalem above my chiefest joy. So what does that mean? Al rosh simchasi. So Amar Rav Yitzchak concludes the Gemara as that Efer makla sheberosh chasan. This is the burnt ashes that we put on the head of a chasan. I don't know how many have seen this at weddings, but this is something that is a very prevalent minhag, that in addition to breaking the glass, often the Masar Kiddushin will take ashes and put it on the head of a chasan, taken directly from this Gemara. So let's pause here for a moment and just think a little bit about what it is that the rabbis are describing here. What is it that Rabbi Yehoshua, this list, how did we come up with this list? What is the common denominator, or what is the logic behind these particular instances for Zecher LeMikdash? I see that everyone is silent, so I don't know if I can even solicit participation. So I'll say the following. At first blush, when I first saw this list, so I thought that, well, the rabbis wanted to put little markers of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash in kind of prevalent places in our lives. They wanted it to be kind of a pervasive, small reminder, little kind of breadcrumbs everywhere. So you have it on your home, you have it at your table, you have it on your person, right? So you're at the home, leaving the one amma unfinished. At your table, leaving one object off the table, leaving one item from the meal, from the menu off the table, and then from a person, from the jewelry that a woman would wear. But I think we can actually do a little bit better than that. I think we can go a little deeper into where this, into understanding, getting into the mind, inhabiting the minds of the rabbis by looking at source number 3, which is just the pasuk, right? I noted that the Gemara appeals to a verse in Tehillim, a familiar verse. Let's just spend a minute looking at the context of that verse. So that verse is taken from a chapter in Psalms 137, and it is it's perhaps a familiar chapter. We're on Shabbos, before we begin benching, we recite Shir Hamalos, a parak of Tehillim, a chapter of Psalms. Really, during the week, when there is no special dimension to the day, we're supposed to begin benching with Al Naharos Bavel, this chapter of Psalms, which I've excerpted it. This is about half, maybe a little bit more than half of that chapter, and it's really a wrenching, very, very beautiful parak of Tehillim, and it says as follows: Al Naharos Bavel, Sham Yashavnu Gam Bachinu B'Zachrinu Es Tzion. Right, on the rivers of Babylon. I think there's a song with those words. On the river, by the rivers of Babylon, we sat, we wept when we remembered Zion. So it's describing the exiles from Israel being taken away during the Babylonian exile, and seeing and remembering Zion, and remembering Zion and weeping. And it says, Al aravim besocha talinu kinorosenu. Upon the willows in the midst thereof, we hanged up our harps. Right? You see this image of their harps hanging on trees because they're being abandoned. Why? Kisham she'elunu shovenu divrei shir v'tolalenu simcha. Because our captors asked us our tormentors, they asked us to play music for them. They said, Shiru lanu mishir Tzion, sing us some of those songs from Tzion, sing us songs from the land from which you have been exiled and taken captive, right? And the Misharer, the poet, the author says, Ich nashir et shir Hashem alat manechar. How could we possibly sing the song of the Lord on foreign soil? And in that context, if I forget Jerusalem, may my right hand be forgotten. May my tongue cling to my upper lip, which is to say, to be not able to sing, right? If I forget you, if I don't set Jerusalem above my chiefest joy. So these are words that we've sung and we've said 100 times. But the context really matters, right? Right? I forget my right hand. I'm going to presume that what we're talking about here is not just that our right hand is indispensable, but our right hand is indispensable in the playing of an instrument, in the playing of a harp. Tibat l'chiki is in the process of singing, to sing joyful songs. May my tongue cling to my palate to make me unable to express those expressions of joy, right? And that's the idea here, right? It's not simply that we remember Yerushalayim always. That is the case, but there's more specificity here. But what we're getting from this pasuk is, in fact, the idea that I can't express kind of unmitigated joy anymore. The joy of song, the joy of singing out, the joy of celebration. That is what is made impossible because of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. And now let's go back to the Gemara, right? What did the Gemara say? What were the instances? What were the places where the rabbis tell us you should have some sort of small intervention, some sort of indication that the Beis HaMikdash has been destroyed? When do we hearken back to the destruction of the Mikdash? So when you build a home, right? Building a home is a moment of great joy. Building a home is not only is it a moment of great joy, but also so much joy and celebration happens within the context of a home. So in that great moment of elation and joy, the rabbis say, make some sort of marker. Doesn't mean you can't be joyful, but make some sort of marker. What's next? We have at your table. What do we do at our table? A table, a festive meal. The rabbis tell us you can have a festive meal, but at those festive meals, when you're breaking bread, and again, when you're celebrating, that's when you need to remove one dish to nod to the fact that the Mikdash is destroyed. When a woman puts on jewelry, when do we put on jewelry, right? A woman gets bedecked in all of her finest jewelry when there's a moment of celebration. Reflective of Eich Nashir et Shir Hashem, right? Al Rosh Simchasi, the idea that, and certainly, of course, the Chasan and the Kala standing under the chuppah. Again, it's a moment of great joy. And so what the rabbis do is they say, look, right? So to summarize this Gemara, the Gemara started off with people who felt, the right way to commemorate and to react to the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash was to fundamentally change the texture of our lives, and where they were even willing to forego, bread in addition to meat and wine and certain fruits, right? That was one approach, which was doing something so total that reflect the enormity of the loss. And the rabbi said, no, that's not going to be doable. It's not going to be tenable. It's not going to be sustainable for the Jewish people. Instead, take the high moments and tamper them down a little bit, or tamp them down rather a little bit. Take the joyful moments and
I muted it and doesn't mute.
And sorry. Right, take those joyful moments and in some way introduce a ceiling, right, where we at least remember that the joy is incomplete. There's another wrinkle, another dimension that I just want to add in, and then we'll conclude. And that is, if you look in source number 4. So in source number 4, we have yet another expression, another dimension to the way in which we remember the Mikdash. And this will take us to the title of this year. The Mishnah in Sukkah tells us that in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, it was only within the confines of the Beis HaMikdash, of the temple, that people took a lulav and esrog for all 7 days of Sukkot. Outside of the Beis HaMikdash, people only took a lulav and an esrog, took the arba minim, on day 1. But after the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says that everyone, even outside of the Mikdash, should take a lulav and esrog, should wave a lulav and esrog for all 7 days of Sukkot, zecher lemikdash, as a remembrance to the Mikdash. And you can ask, what? It's here again. It's kind of incongruous to insert such a sad theme into a Yom Tov. We know that Yom Tov actually ends the period of mourning. If a person is in Avelos for a family member, it ends when you hit a Yom Tov. So the rabbis clearly saw the feeling of mourning to be totally kind of irreconcilable with the joy of a Yom Tov. So why are we introducing mourning into Sukkot, right? What else do we have? We have another Moed where we have a very prominently featured Zecher LeMikdash, right? Zecher LeMikdash Kehilel, Kain Asa Hillel, Bizman Shebeis HaMikdash Hayakayim, Hayamunachem, right? Right. We know that we do this, we commemorate at the Pesach Seder, the special type of sandwich that Hillel would have in the times of the Mikdash, where he would take the matzah and the maror and the charuset and the carbon Pesach all together and make a sandwich of it. It was kind of like a lafa, right. And again, you can ask, how does that live? How does that coexist with the other themes and the joys of Pesach? It doesn't seem to live there comfortably. And what Rav Yosef Dov Soloveitchik pointed out, once you see it, that you can't unsee it. It becomes so obvious. But what he notes is that there are two different things going on here. We have something called Zecher LeMikdash. We have something called Zecher LeChorban, which is remembering the destruction of the Mikdash. But then there's another thing that we have in other instances called Zecher LeMikdash, right? Zecher LeChorban, remembering the destruction, Zecher LeMikdash, remembering the Mikdash. Remembering, so Zecher LeChorban is a kind of mournful expression of sadness of what we have lost and the pain of that trauma and loss. But then you have something else called Zecher LeMikdash, which is a kind of wistful remembrance, a kind of so what I'm looking for, almost like nostalgic, joyful remembrance of the Mikdash, and a hopeful look towards the future. There's a kind of a hopefulness that, look, I'm going to continue to do this thing, remember how we used to do it, and prepare so that when the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt, ultimately, we'll have this practice kind of in our muscle memory. And so it has a much more positive, it has a happy valence, right? It's really fundamentally kind of a joyful thing. And that's why they're not incongruous rather with Pesach and with Sukkot. It's actually a joyful thing. And so just to kind of put a fine point on it, often when a person is mourning for a loved one, so in the context of Shiva, very often, obviously it's very dependent on the person and the context, but a Beis Avel can also be full of laughter, right? A Beis Avel can also be full of wonderful stories. A Beis Avel can be filled with joy and pride and happiness as you reflect on a life that was lived and lived well and ultimately was lost. And so the rabbis here are adding another ingredient into the way that we reflect on the Mikdash. It's not pure somberness or even sobriety. It's also, there's also joy and pride and happiness. So all of that, hopefully what we've done here in the little bit of time that we had together is to demonstrate, number one, that the rabbis were keenly aware that it is hard to connect and to kind of bear the weight of the loss of the Beis HaMikdash. And the rabbis were not interested in inauthentic, kind of dishonest, performative types of grandiose mourning for the Mikdash. They wanted to give us something that was attainable, something that we could tap into at appropriate times in a sincere way. What that looks like in most instances is just in our greatest moment of joy, recognizing that there is something that is missing, and also they also introduced into the one ingredient into the broader picture. They introduced a sense of joy and happiness and pride and nostalgia, and hopefully looking forward to a time when the Beis HaMikdash would be rebuilt. I think all of this makes the notion of mourning the Mikdash and reflecting on the Mikdash hopefully more palatable, more attainable, and something that we maybe can more easily connect to, and hopefully makes this period of time of year hopefully that much more that much more meaningful and real for us. May we live to see the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash. And hopefully next year when I'm invited to LDor, firstly, we won't be on Zoom. Secondly, hopefully it will be, I'll have a whole new array of topics to choose from, because it will be a time of year that is not mourning, but is in fact a time of year of joy and celebration. And I'll look forward to presenting to you in that context as well. Again, I thank you, Eileen, I thank Ruth, and to all of you, and I hope you enjoy the feature.
Thank you, Rabbi Goldberg.
I am going to stop the sharing. And again, wish everybody a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Goldberg, and please stay on for the movie.